We are here today with Peter Miles, who is the CEO of eHemp House. And this is Glenn Goodwin, and I'm Dale Walkinen, and we're both from Facing Future. Peter, we're so happy to have you with us today, and we'd love to have you start with a brief explanation of the difference between cannabis that people smoke and hemp.
Brilliant, Dale and Glenn. Great to be here. And yeah, I mean, there is a common confusion between the cannabis, which has got a very bad name over the last sort of 30, 40, 50 years, and the industrial hemp plant, which is part of the same sort of plant species, but has got a completely different function. In fact, industrial hemp has been cultivated by humankind for well over 8,000 years, and it's used for a whole variety of different products, ranging from rope and sails for shipping, to paper, to textiles, and to things like hempcrete for building. So it has a vast range of uses, and we're not really at Hemp House, we're not sort of discovering that hemp is great for these things. What we're actually doing is looking back to things that mankind's been doing thousands of years and going, oh, actually they had some great ideas and it was much better than the products that we've come to use that are all based on fossil fuels and things like oil. So that's the differentiation between hemp and cannabis.
We're very interested in the environmental impact of hemp versus, say, cotton for fiber, and also, you know, the synthetic fibers, which are producing all these microparticles that are getting into the water and are creating much more havoc than people realize. I think you can wash hemp without creating microfibers.
Yes. So as far as textiles and cotton go, just on the textiles front, what's interesting is actually they found a hemp textile 8,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. So again, I come back to the fact that we're not sort of discovering stuff. So as far as cotton goes, is where you've just kind of highlighted some of the environmental damages that happen from cultivating cotton. With hemp, you don't need to use the pesticides that you would do with cotton. It doesn't need those. It doesn't need the weed killers because of the rate it grows. It's a natural weed suppressant. And when you actually, because technically the herd that is used from the fiber side is already whitish in color, you don't need the bleach, which is a really damaging part of the sort of industrial process of creating
Peter, can you
cotton.
explain for our viewers what herd is?
Okay. So another, I'm going to carry on. This is going to be a recurrent theme, Dale. Another great thing about hemp is that you can use the whole plant. So you can use the plant from the seeds through all the stalk. And what in the stalk, in the fibrous part of the plant, you have the outer covering, and then between that and the inner side, you have a part of the plant that's called the herd. And mainly that's used for the cultivation, for the processing into things like cotton. It's also used for processing for paper and for the hempcrete and other products like that. And that part of the plant is paler actually than you need for the cotton and the paper. So there's various structural and technical reasons why you don't need a hugely chemical based industrial process to create the end product.
If hemp can be made into paper instead of using trees, could that be scaled up to an industrial kind of level if we could really make paper products in a serious way?
Yeah, you certainly can. Some interesting facts about that. You need 4 times as much acreage or hectareage of trees as you do for hemp to be able to actually create the same amount of paper. The paper that you create through hemp, it tends to be recyclable more often because the fibers are longer. So it actually can be scaled up pretty quickly because it comes from, it comes from the stalks, the fiber, the biomass part of the plant. So it's got advantages such as when you harvest the tree, you cut it down. Now you have to wait another 10, 15, 20 years to grow another tree to harvest. With a hemp crop, you go from seed to harvest in 90 to 120 days, which means you can recycle that crop very quickly. And the other important thing about the hemp, as far as actually cropping it, is that it's what's called phytoremediation, which is a big long word for means it actually repairs the soil. So as it cultivates, not only is it sucking CO2 out of the atmosphere, but it's actually repairing the soils as it goes along. You can harvest it in 90 to 120 days. And then if you use that same agricultural land for another crop, that crop actually benefits from all the goodness that the hemp crop has left in the ground after it's been harvested. So there's nothing not to like, Dale.
So the nutrients from the hemp plant itself goes into the soil, and does it develop kind of special nutrients that other plants don't necessarily have, or?
What it does is it's got I mean, don't want to get too technical, but it's got large tap roots. It basically repairs the soil. It fixes a lot of carbon in the soil through its growth, and it has some other good soil structural aspects to it. I mean, it's one of the so just to explain how why it's really good at repairing soils. It's about the only crop. It is the only crop, as far as I'm aware, that they grow around Chernobyl, because it's actually involved in removing the heavy metals from the soil around that plant. So yeah, it's been used for ages. There's a lot of research that shows if you use it as a rotation crop, the following crop you grow is going to grow bigger, better, and more nutritious than it would have done otherwise, because of the amount of good you're actually leaving in the soil from the hemp crop.
And where does hemp grow? I mean, we don't want to be taking down forests to grow hemp, as happens, say, with palm oil, which is such a horrible process of creating these palm forests. Where would hemp be planted on a large scale?
Right. So I'll answer that in two parts. One, hemp will grow pretty much anywhere. I mean, not wishing to go back to the cannabis thing, but it is a weed, and so it will pretty much grow anywhere. There are farmers who would be growing, already have agricultural land that's being used for agricultural purposes. We'll be using it as a rotation crop for all the reasons that we've already spoken about. As far as eHemp House goes, one of our major focus is Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa. And there are several reasons for that, not the least being that the UN designates a certain type of land, which is called underutilized land, which is a bit ambiguous terminology, but what it basically means is land that isn't forested, land that isn't currently being used for agriculture, but land that is deemed to be of medium to high potential to be used as agriculture. So part of our strategy is that in the world, the UN have identified about 400 million hectares of underutilized land. But in sub-Saharan Africa, there's 200 million hectares of that. So it's over almost 50% of the global total is in Africa. And the idea is that with our technology, the Smart Box, the processing facilities that provides are really important, because in Africa, there are two major things holding back agriculture. One is access to water, so irrigation, and the other is access to processing facilities for the crop. So what we envisage, as well as working with existing farmers and some contract farmers, the idea is that we enable small and medium-sized farmers to be able to use some of that underutilized land. And our first initial farm was in Zambia, where there's 11 million hectares alone in Zambia of underutilized land. So our idea is to allow them to be able to utilize that underutilized land, There you go. By using our Smart Box technology, they're able to then start to actually create some products and begin the whole process through phase 1 and phase 2.
For us, what's underutilized is perhaps habitat. I get concerned when I hear, utilize versus, some of it has, other purposes than human purposes. I don't know what the land is. I'm just curious.
No, you're right, and there will be things on the land. There'll be cover scrub, that's for sure. And what we have to do is make sure that, as I said, it's a slightly ambiguous term. So we have to make sure that the underutilized land that we are going to utilize isn't going to destroy habitats or anything like that. So that's important part of the philosophy of what we're trying to achieve. But underutilized a lot of the time could even mean land that has been used for agriculture, maybe for tobacco cultivation, but isn't currently being used. But as far as, so I take your point, and I accept that sometimes, you've got to, you can't just be a blanket acceptance. Oh, if it's termed as underutilized, that means I can use it. That's not strictly it. But the other thing about it is that with the hemp crop, is quite a lot of research that's shown that it is quite positive for nature and for the environment for the reasons I've spoken about, but also bees and other flora and fauna quite like the crops. There's quite a lot of tobacco cultivation both in Zambia and in Zimbabwe. So hopefully,
and gradually that's going to reduce.
There is a decrease in the use of tobacco, and it is showing at the moment. And this is an alternate crop that they can actually use to do it. And interestingly, whilst I got us on to the topic of tobacco, I'll just make the point that from an environmental destructive viewpoint, tobacco has to be dried. And most of the farmers in Africa will either use coal or they'll use wood that they harvest and from trees and stuff around. So there's a deforestation. You can actually make a small sort of briquette, a hemp briquette from the hemp crop that can be a substitute for coal. So, you know, there are quite a lot of opportunities to not just focus on the environmental benefits of the crop, but actually some of the products can be replacements for very damaging things like coal.
Like oil as well, you said. You know, hemp can produce oil that could run tractors.
Yeah, so in fact, in the smart box, we have the hemp seed oil that we produce can be a biodiesel and will run the generator. So that will actually run the generator, which provides electricity for things like irrigation, for refrigeration, lighting, and can actually be used for local area communications as well. So not just the farmers are benefiting from the processing, it's the local communities as well who are being able to benefit from the co-benefits that are provided by the smart box, if you like.
Okay, we need to define the smart box and take a look at that. What is that?
So the smart box is a kind of container-sized semi-mobile product. And what it does is, at its core, it takes the hemp harvest and it turns it into three. You know, we spoke about thousands of products you can get from hemp. Well, you can, but in phase one, which is the smart box side of things, you can get three products from it, which are hemp seed oil, which Glenn and I just mentioned. Part of it can be used as a biodiesel to run the generator. You get hemp seed cake, which is actually very nutritious. It's actually could be for human nutrition, but in the initial phase, we think it'll be for cattle feed. And the fiber, which we wax lyrical about everything you could turn it into, but in the first instance, we think it will be cattle bedding. We'll sell it for cattle bedding, but that cattle bedding then becomes part of a circular soil regenerative process where it's used for compost and it's used back into the land.
I'm more interested, just personally, in hemp as a replacement protein because, you know, as the IPCC report just told us, methane is a critical gas that we have to stop releasing. One of the quickest ways we can affect that, we can't stop the ice from melting and releasing methane, but we could have fewer cows. You know, cows enteric their digestive flora, I guess it is, produces a lot of methane. Not to mention that, of course, the cows require a lot of water, and in Africa, you know, where we know there are going to be droughts, facilitating animal agriculture to me is not a great solution.
But what we do as far as the cattle goes, it's not a big cattle ranch. What we envisage with the cattle, as far as our system goes, is that the cattle are part of a circular regenerative soil system. So they're grown in tandem. They're grown in symbiotic relationship with the soil and with the products and the vegetables that get grown in that soil. And what we have on our farm in Zambia, Zambia isn't yet legalized for hemp, but what we're doing on the farm in Zambia is we're teaching this a regenerative agricultural system, which you're not going to like because it does include cattle, but it does include cattle. But what we're teaching that to local farmers and the community. And what that system does is it uses over 50% less water. So the system already is using less water because it composts. And you know, and it's got this worm culture and other stuff that makes the soils more productive. The products you grow from it are more nutritious, organic, and are used basically by the local population. So I do entirely agree with you. In a wonderful world, we could wave our magic wand and stop people eating meat tomorrow. That's not going to happen. So if they are going to eat some meat, hopefully less meat, let's make sure the meat they're eating has contributed back to the soils that other products can be grown in.
What is the difference between the CO2 that the hemp extracts as opposed to a tree, for example?
But yeah, so trees, it's the carbon cycle. We all learn it at school, right? It's where the photosynthesis and carbon is sucked from the atmosphere as the trees grow, and then hopefully it gets released out as oxygen is respiration and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lovely balance. You could probably replace the word nature with balance, because that's what nature does. It balances things up.
That's what it needs.
So trees, hemp will suck more CO2 out of the atmosphere. So a hectare of hemp sucks more CO2 out of the atmosphere than trees, marginally. The only natural product that sucks significantly more CO2 out of the atmosphere are mangrove swamps, believe it or not. So if a hectare of hemp will suck 22 tons of carbon out of the atmosphere, and these depend on the sort of industrial hemp you're growing and all kinds of other stuff, but let's say it's 22. A mangrove swamp will suck out about 100. So per harvest, a hemp crop on a hectare will suck out about 22. A mangrove swamp over the course of a year will suck out about 100. But the thing about a mangrove swamp,
100 tons.
100 tons versus 22 tons?
Per harvest, yeah.
Per
so if you get 2 harvests on that same hectare, you're sort of 44. But the thing about a mangrove swamp is it's very, very good at being a mangrove swamp, but it isn't very, very good at being anything else. So with a hemp crop, you can turn that hemp crop into a whole variety of different products, some of which directly replace environmentally damaging products like concrete. So you get hempcrete can replace concrete. We've already spoken about textiles replacing cotton, paper, so you don't be chopping down your trees. So the thing about the hemp crop is yes, it sucks out prodigious amounts of CO2, but it also turns into all these other products which are very beneficial for the environment.
I would like to talk about the hempcrete, because concrete is a major polluter. And hempcrete, I believe you can mix hemp with lime and water and get a really viable building material. That's very exciting.
No, it is. It definitely is. And there are quite a few initiatives underway. But I'll retain my habit of reaching back into history for an example. So there is a bridge across the River Sarthe in northern France, which has got hempcrete mortar that holds it together, and it's withstood for 1,500 years. So this had panzer divisions retreating from Normandy coming across it and trying to blow it up. So again, it's not something that we've discovered, it's something that we're rediscovering. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff going on in building materials. There's stuff in America where they're building houses, and you can prove that this hempcrete, this organic material is much better for insulating homes and allowing homes to breathe. And in fact, with the lime that you mentioned quite rightly, it continues to extract CO2 as it hardens over several years. So, so yeah, it's a fantastic product. Should be being used for all houses. Hopefully, will be in the not too distant.
Well, like for instance, your project in Zambia, it's if it helps housing in the community as well where the farmers live, then it's another tick for hemp.
Yeah, it's probably best to elaborate a little bit on that point, Glenn, and say so. The eHemp House project has got 2 distinct phases as far as Africa goes. One is phase 1, which we've sort of talked about with the smart box, which you're able to fund through the capex because of the capital you release from the carbon markets. But phase 2 is probably, well, it is the most exciting part of what we're trying to achieve. So the smart box, as we said, has fairly limited processing facility, so it only turns it into sort of basic products. But as we move into phase 2, and that crop continues to release capital from the carbon markets, we will invest that money in building the factory, the industrial base, to turn the hemp crop into the more interesting products like the hempcrete for building, the textiles, the bioplastics, the biofuels, etc. because you need more sort of factory-based processing to be able to do that. And the concept is that will allow Africa to be able to create a sustainable development pathway based on environmentally friendly products, which obviously we're still not doing in the West, because Africa is the fastest growing consumer market in the world right now. It is going to continue to develop. And if it develops in the same way that China did, then quite honestly, we're all in deep trouble. So we have to find another route for Africa. We can't tell them not to develop, because that's just not on. So let's provide them, let's help them build a decarbonized industrial base from which they can sort of generate sustainable development.
Well, we all hope for the best in the future. It doesn't.
I think if Africa can be this potential huge continent that could provide us with some kind of positive future.
Yeah, there's too many vested interests in the West. There's too many big corporations with too much money, too much influence, who are dragging their feet and dragging our governments back. Whereas in Africa, what you're providing them, it's much easier to do it in a landscape where there isn't already big vested interests. So let's hope that gives real wind to this particular project's hemp sales.
You mentioned in passing hemp plastics. Plastic, of course, is a huge part of the problem in the ocean, especially it breaks into these little tiny particles, and it's in all the fish and in all the wildlife in the ocean. What happens with hemp plastic? Can it be really used for most of the purposes that plastic is now used for? Could we substitute, plastic utensils and plastic containers, and could we package products in hemp instead of in hemp plastic?
Okay, so the hemp plastics, the bioplastics that are produced currently, that I'm aware of, that are produced currently from hemp. So German car makers, for instance, I think it's BMW. Part of some of their bumpers are created from hemp, so they're hemp bioplastics. In fact, Henry Ford, not quite the plastics you're talking about covering, but I'm sure that there are initiatives going on. But Henry Ford actually built a car way back out of hemp bioplastics. He actually ran that on hemp biodiesel as well. So again, we're not. I'm sorry to be boring, but we're not finding new uses in particular for this plant. I think you'll find that because oil has been used for so many different types of plastic, I think what we need to do is investigate fully how many of them are already being researched, how many of them are being used. But yeah, it is got it's because of its long fibrous molecular structure that allows it to be used for all kinds of stuff. So hemp plastics, bioplastics is definitely an area to be considered, and it's biodegradable, obviously. So that's the important thing. With plastics, unfortunately, you end up with your little beads, your microplastics, which will persist for far too long. No one really knows, do they?
Actually, going back to Africa and hemp and do you see hemp as you talk about regenerative? Do you see that the growth of hemp, once it starts growing, can kind of revitalize land as well? Can it encroach in land that is kind of unfarmable, for example? Is it something that you can see happening?
Yes, you can. As I said, I gave the example of Chernobyl. It will, as I said, the sexy scientific term for it is phytoremediation. So it does repair soils. It will grow, pretty well. It will go. It's fairly tolerant of where it will grow, but obviously it's a crop, so you still have to treat it in the right way, and it will repair the soil. So yeah, you may be able to sort of bring back into productive agriculture some areas which have been just depleted because they've been like being overfishing, they've been over cultivated, and
there's no nutrients left.
Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be part of a plan, along with as I said, the regenerative agriculture that we're teaching to the local farmers and communities in Zambia and in Zimbabwe now. Actually, there isn't one answer to anything in this world at the moment. This massive sort of existential threat that we all face has been caused by lots of actions in lots of different areas. As a riposte, as a way of defending that, as a way of coming back at that, we have to do lots of things in lots of different areas. So, exactly. Hemp is a fantastic crop, and I could easily bore you, as I did before, Glenn, for hours on the subject, but it's not the answer.
No,
there isn't the answer. There's lots of different answers that lots of different people can do that are going to make a difference. And the thing about it is we have to do something, because that's the only way we're going to make a difference. So
yeah, that's the only way we're going to see a difference as well. Or, actually,
there's too much. I feel there's an emotional change kind of going on at the moment in the world, and I hate to say it, but I think COVID has helped to a certain extent with that, on the basis that people have seen now practical examples of how threats on a global scale are global and need to be dealt with globally. So I think that's
and experiencing that in the first person as well. Actually,
exactly.
Like you say, the ice sheets are melting, but you're not experiencing that as a but like in the pandemic, you're experiencing it. It's around you. So I think
everyone experienced it.
Yeah,
completely.
But now we also have massive fires, and we have floods. I think of Angela Merkel standing in the flood in Germany, kind of sort of saying, "Oh, I didn't know this could happen here." And the next day she approved the gas pipeline coming from Russia. So, I don't know what our leaders are thinking. They have to get it. I'm really hoping that at the COP things will happen, and the people will wake up.
Yeah, if they don't get it, if they don't get it, we're the people that we need to take action. We need to take action.
I think that's a really important point. I think that's two really important points. I think the most impressive thing about COP26 is the name, because what that means is that's the 26th annual meeting of that group, and they've done virtually nothing in 26 years. So I'm going to have the joy of being there and kicking some people, I hope. But the thing about that is that the problem for politicians in a democracy, when you're facing a global threat, is that how do you tell your electorate that you're going to make them do things that they think are going to punish them, or they're going to suffer, some kind of punitive result from, and actually they look at you and go, well, why aren't they over there doing it? So the problem there is that unless you've got a solid consensus of people doing the similar thing, it's very difficult for democratic politicians to get it through. So what they need that sort of, as Chomsky was saying, they need the people to be actually driving the politicians. The politicians are not going to lead us out of this. They're not capable of it. The structure doesn't allow them to. They need to be driven out of it by the grassroots. And that point about the emotional attachment is very interesting, because part of what we want to do is find a way of with the products that we get, when they buy those products off the supermarket shelf, we'd have a device on there like a QR code or something that will allow the consumer to scan it with the mobile phone, connect them not just with the field where that product's come from, or the farmer that's copped it, but tell them what their money's doing, how their money's being used, what they're part and parcel of, and explaining that actually with an emotional attachment, as a small individual, you might not be able to do much, but as lots of little small individuals, you certainly can. So that has to be the route that we have to focus on to get us to begin to roll back some of the damage, I think.
So the legal implications of growing hemp, is that a hurdle? Is there barriers up there that kind of?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. But do you see that changing? Do you see that?
Well, it is changing. I mean, it's not a question of me being an amazing visionary and going, I see it changing. It is changing, as you see it in the States. The problem is it's patchy even in the States. So there's thing in Europe, the same thing in Africa. As I said, in Zimbabwe, cannabis for medical cannabis and hemp and industrial hemp are legal. You can grow them. In Zambia, they just passed that legislation earlier this year, and it's been signed off, but they still haven't issued the licenses. you know, so that it's a patchwork. But as it moves, you know, I hope that we're able to get a general adoption.
Indeed. Well, it's been wonderful to talk with you today. So informative. It's, you know, what's happening with hemp is very exciting, and we wish you. Would you like to mention your website? And we'll put it under your name as well.
Yeah, so it's ehemp.house. Essentially, is the website, which explains much more about the smart box and what that can do, and how that's going to be rolled out, and how that we hope will be able to form a catalyst for hemp growing in Africa, but also provides a solution for hemp growers in North America as well, because in North America it's actually on a truck, and we're looking to create hemp pellets as a environmentally friendly alternative to wood pellets. So yeah, there's different ways of using the same technology.
Great.